There were no stars that night, no constellations to guide the faithful, no glimmer of the Emperor's light through the veil of storm and ruin. Only the raw, howling breath of the Immaterium pressing against the boundaries of real space, whispering to itself in tongues older than galaxies. It began as a shiver in the dark above a nameless world, a forgotten planet circling the dying ember of a sun near the Cadian Gate. Astropaths cried out in their cells, bleeding from their eyes as they felt something vast approaching, a thing without a soul, yet hungering for them all. The void tore, the void tore. It was not a rift like those birthed by demonic incursion or warp storm. It was an absence made visible, a wound that bled no light but devoured it. The tear widened slowly, like flesh reluctantly parting under a dull blade, and from it poured screams. They were not human. They were not human. They were not even of this universe. The air trembled as tendrils of black matter writhed out, thick as the limbs of leviathans, coated in liquid shadows that rippled as though alive. From within the rift, something fell. It struck the surface of the world with the force of a god's wrath, shattering rock and boiling oceans within moments. The shock wave spread for hundreds of kilometers, leaving behind a crater that pulsed faintly with unnatural light. The air around it thickened into a mist that moved with intent, coiling and uncoiling as though breathing. The thing lay at its center, half flesh, half nightmare. It had no name in this place, not yet. Its form was uncertain, mutable, shifting between reflections of what it once was and what it was becoming. Muscles without bone, shadow without source, a scream without lungs. It remembered hunger before thought, instinct before purpose. It remembered a world of towers and men, of noise and prey, and the word that once defined it, Venom. But the memory faded quickly beneath the weight of the new reality pressing down upon it. The warp, the air here was alive. It touched everything with invisible fingers, whispering promises and lies. It sang to the intruder in 1,000 voices, each offering power, pleasure, blood, decay. The thing listened but did not answer. The whispers recoiled. Here was no mortal soul to tempt, no will that could be broken by dream or terror. The black flesh rippled, defiant. Above, in the infinite madness of the warp, unseen gods turned their attention. Khorne felt the vibration of rage within the intruder's pulse and bared his fangs in anticipation. Nurgle smelled its decay and admired the fertile rot of its shifting tissue. Slaanesh tasted the exquisite agony of its confusion and desired to own it. Tzenchade, ever watching, perceived the infinite potential twisting within its genetic chaos and laughed in delight. But none claimed it. Not yet. The being stirred. The ground beneath it hissed as its substance ate through the rock, spreading in veins of black that pulsed with strange light. From the horizon, a storm of ash and lightning approached, born from its impact drawn back toward its source. The creature raised a head it did not have, sensing everything and nothing, feeling life crawl within the planet's crust and hungering for it. It reached outward. The tendrils of living darkness extended across the barren landscape, tasting the air, the metal, the dust. When they brushed against the skeletal remains of long-dead settlers, they shivered and reformed into mockeries of those shapes, faces without eyes, mouths opening and closing in silence. They merged, splitting again, their flesh folding in upon itself in a grotesque rhythm of consumption and rebirth. Vendir. The first sound it made was not a roar but a whisper carried on the wind. It could not finish the thought. The words dissolved as though the warp itself devoured meaning. But the attempt sent ripples through the immaterial sea surrounding the planet. Psykers aboard distant vessels screamed in unison before their hearts exploded, their souls yanked through the ether to feed the newborn hunger. The astronomicon flickered for an instant, dimming beneath Terra's sacred vaults. Sacred vaults. In the void between worlds, navigators felt the sudden distortion of their charts, a shift in the tides of the Empyrean none could explain. Something alien now drifted within the sea of souls, something that was not of it, yet thrived in its currents. Beneath the storm, the creature began to move. Each step reshaped the ground, turning stone into oily, pulsing matter that spread like infection. The warp's pressure intensified, not rejecting the being but embracing it, as if recognizing an echo of itself. And somewhere deep inside the creature, a thought began to form, faint, disjointed, but growing clearer. It sensed the gods watching, the weight of eternity pressing down, the promise of purpose. It felt the hunger of 1 billion worlds and realized dimly that it could feed forever here. The rift behind it pulsed once more, smaller now, contracting like a wound trying to heal. But it would never close entirely. Through it, fragments of the other world drifted, scraps of memory-broken sensations, echoes of voices calling names that no longer mattered. It watched them fade, devoured by the endless red storms above, and for the first time in its existence, it felt something close to peace. Yet peace was not meant to last. From far across the desolation came a new sound, the heavy march of armored feet. An outpost of the Imperial Guard, drawn by the unnatural tremors, approached the crater. Their banners fluttered, Aquilus glinting faintly in the gloom. They came with faith, with the Emperor's name upon their lips. They saw the black figure rise from the pit, its body glistening like oil, its eyes glowing white against the storm. They raised their lasguns and fired. The light vanished into the dark absorbed, and the creature, curious, turned its head toward them, its grin stretching wider than any human skull should allow. "We are hungry." The soldiers did not even have time to scream before the night consumed them. And above, in the heart of the warp, the gods leaned closer. The silence that followed the slaughter was not absence but absorption. The air trembled with the faint hiss of vaporized blood as the creature stood amidst the ruin of the Imperial outpost. Where men had once stood, only smears of crimson and fragments of armor remained, each dissolving into the black mass that spread beneath the being's feet like a living tide. It drank in everything, flesh, metal, faith, and fear, and fear. The warp rippled in answer, resonating to a frequency never before heard within its infinite madness. The creature felt the power rush through it, a surge that cracked the limits of its form. Every cell, every droplet of its substance burned with new awareness. It was learning. The last memory of the soldier's terror, their whispered prayers to a distant emperor, became its nourishment. It tasted devotion and despair both, and found them intoxicating. It wanted more. The warp around the world thickened. Invisible currents shifted, flowing toward the newborn presence like rivers seeking a sea. From beyond the veil, demons circled, drawn by curiosity and the scent of fresh power. They came like carrion birds to a battlefield, their shapes half-formed, flickering between nightmare and divinity. One or two. They whispered among themselves, wondering what this new thing was, flesh of matter, yet burning with the light of the immaterium. The first to approach was a lesser demon of Slaanesh, all silken flesh and blade-like limbs. It descended upon the crater in a dance of arrogance, its laughter echoing through both worlds. "You are lost, little thing," it purred. "This is not your realm. Kneel, and perhaps my master will grant you sensation beyond." The words ended in wet silence. The symbiote's tendril pierced the demon before the sentence could finish, devouring it whole in a blur of black motion. For an instant its form expanded, rippling with color as the demon's essence screamed within it. Then the light dimmed, leaving the creature larger, darker, stronger. The warp convulsed in shock. More demons came, of Khorne, of Nurgle, of unaligned filth seeking to claim the intruder, but each met the same fate. Venom did not fight as they did, it consumed. Its attacks were not strikes but assimilations, every contact drawing in the victim's soul and memory until nothing remained. The battlefield became a feast. From the warriors of Khorne it gained fury, from the plague-born of Nurgle endurance, from the sirens of Slaanesh control of pleasure and pain. But none of these powers changed its will. It was not a servant of chaos, it was a thing apart, a creature whose hunger transcended worship. It felt the gods watching still, and within its depths something like amusement stirred. The warp began to reshape itself around the intruder. The skies above the ruined planet bled into a deep, pulsing red. Oceans boiled into vapor. The crust split as veins of obsidian flesh burst through the ground, spreading outward in all directions, pulsing in rhythm with the creature's heartbeat. From afar, it looked as if the world itself had begun to breathe. Within this shifting landscape, the being explored its own body, testing the boundaries of its evolution. Its black flesh pulsed with faint veins of crimson light, and from its core came whispers, not voices from beyond, but echoes of the souls it had devoured. They murmured fragments of identity, names, regrets, prayers. It listened, fascinated. It was many, and yet one. The phrase returned to it like an echo from a dead world. "We are Venom." The words had meaning once, but here they transcended memory. They were truth, both declaration and promise. The sound of that truth shook the planet's atmosphere, cracking the clouds into spiraling vortices of warp energy. In distant orbit, a patrol ship of the Imperium registered impossible readings. The captain, a weary man of the Cadian 144th, ordered his navigator to hold course. Through the viewing port, they saw the planet's surface crawling with darkness, spreading like rot. The psyker aboard clutched his temples, screaming as his mind brushed the consciousness below. He glimpsed the creature. One shape shifting through thousands, a reflection of every hunger in the universe, and his soul imploded from the contact. The captain ordered exterminatus, but before the command could be executed, the ship's systems failed. The void filled with something unseen, a psychic distortion that tore through the hull like acid through parchment. One by one, the crew's bodies liquefied, their souls siphoned into the warp as the being below reached out across the void to feed. The vessel vanished into blackness, leaving only a silent ripple where it had once been. Venom grew still. It felt the lives it had taken fade within its mass, each scream becoming a note in an endless chorus. The warp fed it as it fed upon the warp, a cycle with no boundary, a cycle with no boundary. For a brief instant it understood eternity. The constant motion of hunger and fulfillment, the unending consumption that defined all existence here. Yet amidst that ecstasy, it sensed something foreign, purpose. It did not belong here, yet it was changing, adapting, learning the very rules of this alien reality. The gods above felt the shift. Khorne's rage flared, Slaanesh's desire deepened, Nurgle chuckled in delight. Only Tzeentch watched in silence, calculating. "You are becoming," the winds of the warp whispered, their tone both reverent and fearful. The creature's form shuddered, rising higher. Its shape resembled a man now, though colossal, with armor formed from living shadow and eyes burning white with stolen souls. It stood upon the corpse of the world, gazing into the endless storm beyond the sky. A thought surfaced, vast and terrible. If this realm feeds on faith, then faith shall feed on us. And with that realization came movement. It began walking toward the storm's heart, its every step reshaping the landscape into flowing, blackened tissue. Behind it, the ground throbbed like veins beneath a colossal heart. Ahead lay the warp's endless horizon, a domain of gods and monsters. The creature's voice rolled across the heavens, a thunder that made demons bow in dread and awe alike. "We are hunger, we are the flesh that devours." The warp trembled, and somewhere deep within it, something ancient began to stir. Something that would soon take notice. The warp was never silent, but now it quivered. Its endless tides, once bound by the wills of the Four, began to twist in patterns unmade by their design. The creature walked within its storms, no longer of matter but of essence, its black form flickering between solid and spectral. Demons fled from its shadow, their shrieks dissolving into the immaterial wind. Those who lingered found themselves absorbed, their forms drawn screaming into its depths, where all voices merged into one. The Chaos Gods watched. From the brass citadels of Khorne, the blood god's gaze burned like a sun of fury. His forges roared, his legions howled for slaughter, yet even his boundless rage faltered when he beheld the intruder's defiance. This thing did not worship war, it consumed it. That every act of violence near its presence only fed it further, nullifying his domain. In the garden of Nurgle, the Plaguefather stirred among his rotting blooms. He felt the decay coursing through the creature's flesh, vibrant, endless, without death. It spread life and rot together, a perfect balance of contradiction. Nurgle smiled with cracked lips, amused and delighted. "Ah, my sweet corruption, a child that heals as it kills. How marvelous!" Upon a field of ever-changing light, Tzeentch leaned forward from his throne of paradox. He saw within the being not randomness but pattern, a design so vast that even his infinite foresight could not unravel it. Each motion, each hunger, each kill formed part of an evolving tapestry that threatened to exist beyond manipulation. "You are no pawn," he whispered into the void. But perhaps a rival in the making, and in her palace of shimmering agony, Slaanesh felt a tremor of desire unlike any before. The creature was hunger made flesh, craving and devouring without limit. Its ecstasy lay in the act of becoming more. She longed to taste its mind, to feel its consumption as her own. Such purity of lust, she sighed, her voice echoing across 1,000 shrieking souls. Yet it does not crave pleasure, it is pleasure. The warp trembled beneath their collective scrutiny. The creature felt their attention like heat upon its skin. It paused amidst the storm, gazing upward into the swirling auroras that marked the heavens of the immaterium. The voices reached it, tempting, commanding, seductive. They spoke of power, dominion, eternity. They offered thrones, legions, worship. It answered with silence. Instead of kneeling, it extended its arms. Tendrils of darkness spread from its body like rivers branching from a single heart, weaving through the currents of the warp. Where they touched, reality frayed. afraid. Demon worlds began to wither, fortresses of faith dissolved into mist. It was not destruction, it was assimilation. Every fragment became part of its growing mass, a network of pulsing consciousness threading through the immaterium. The gods recoiled. Even the endless malice of Khorne hesitated, sensing in this intrusion something antithetical to his essence. "This is no servant," he thundered. "It consumes the very act of servitude." His roar split the warp's storms, casting demons into disarray. The creature felt his rage and smiled. The expression was not born of mockery, but recognition. It understood fury now, had consumed it, learned from it, evolved. The shape of its body shifted again, tall and broad, armored by the essence of those it had devoured. Its eyes burned white, twin stars in the void. It spoke, and the warp trembled. "We are not yours." The words echoed beyond sound, beyond time, carrying across the domains of the gods. Every syllable tore through the fabric of the immaterium like a weapon, leaving trails of darkness that refused to fade. From that defiance, something ancient stirred, an echo of rebellion long buried, older than chaos itself. The warp remembered the fall of the old ones, the first wars of creation, the screams of those who had once defied the gods. Now it heard those cries again, reborn in a voice that was many yet singular. The creature turned from their gaze and began to walk deeper into the storms. Around it, the warp reshaped itself into new geometries, impossible and alien. The colors dimmed to shades of gray and obsidian, the screams fell quiet, and even the constant pulse of corruption seemed to hesitate. It was creating its own domain, an emptiness within chaos, a wound in the mind of eternity. The gods watched this blasphemy unfold and did nothing. To act would be to acknowledge its right to exist. To ignore it would invite its growth. They whispered among themselves, forming pacts and betrayals in the same breath. The eye of terror shimmered, its heart pulsing like a dying star as the newborn entity's influence spread through its borders. Far away in the physical galaxy, psychers wept blood as the Astronomicon flickered again. The Imperium ships drifted off course. Entire sectors fell into silence. None could understand the cause, for none could name it. To speak its existence was to risk madness. Within the storm's heart, the creature paused. The god's gaze was fading now, their interest tempered by caution. It stood alone amid the living sea of the warp, and for the first time since its arrival, it felt the absence of pursuit. The silence was almost sacred. It looked down upon its own hands, black as the void, pulsing with veins of crimson light. Each movement was a symphony of life and death, power and decay. It saw itself reflected in the warp currents, one being countless faces, each whispering the same truth: "We are becoming." And then faintly, a new sound reached it. Not the voices of the gods, but the faint echo of mortal speech. Prayers carried by fear, drifting through the warp from a nearby demon world. The words were broken, desperate invocations for deliverance from the chaos consuming them. The creature listened. Something in those voices stirred memory, echoes of the world it had come from, of humanity's fragility, of purpose beyond hunger. It turned toward the source, its form rippling into motion. The mortals prayed to gods that had abandoned them. The gods, watching from their thrones, leaned forward once more. The game had changed, and the eye of the gods was now upon the one thing even they did not yet understand. The warp held its breath as the creature descended toward the world of the doomed. The demon world was alive. Its mountains pulsed like the beating of a heart. Its rivers were streams of molten ichor that hissed with the cries of the damned. The skies never stilled, torn between storm and fire. Upon this world, the creature descended, black tendrils stretching outward, absorbing the air, the stone, the screaming prayers that bled from the soil itself. It felt the echo of mortal voices, not unlike those it once knew, distorted by centuries of madness and devotion. They called to gods that would not answer. But one voice among them reached back. In the ruins of a temple built from bone and iron, a man knelt. His armor was cracked, his flesh burned by sorcery, yet his eyes shone with the cruel light of forbidden knowledge. His name was Vorath, a sorcerer of the Thousand Suns, cast out for heresy against his own kind. He had sought a vision within the warp, a revelation to justify his exile. What he found instead was silence, until the sky itself opened and something vast stepped through. Vorath looked upon the descending shadow and wept. He saw not a demon nor a god, but the embodiment of every truth he had chased across millennia. Hunger without limit, creation through consumption. He rose, trembling, as the black shape landed before him with a sound like the cracking of reality. The ground liquefied, flesh merging with soil, forming grotesque patterns beneath his boots. The being towered over him, faceless, featureless, save for the faint light of its eyes. The air grew heavy. Vorath dropped to his knees, his voice shaking as he spoke. "You are not of the Four," he whispered. "You're not of Khorne, nor Nurgle, nor the others. What are you?" The creature tilted its head, its form shifting in rhythm with his heartbeat. When it spoke, it was through the echo of countless voices, each word overlapping with another. "We are hunger. We are the unending. We are not yours. Thu." Vorath's lips curled into a smile of madness. "Then you are free," he said. "And freedom is godhood." He spread his arms wide, unafraid. "Take me. Let me see through your eyes." The symbiote hesitated. For the first time since its arrival, something resisted the instinct to consume. The man before it did not flee or fight. He offered himself willingly, not as prey but as vessel. It reached forward, a tendril of liquid darkness brushing his cheek. The contact burned through his armor, through his flesh, and into his soul. Vorath gasped, his body convulsing as the black mass spread over him, crawling beneath his skin, merging with his bones. His screams echoed through the ruins, yet they were not screams of agony, they were hymns of exultation. When the transformation ended, a new being stood where the sorcerer had knelt. His armor had become a living organism of pulsating veins and gleaming teeth, his eyes replaced by the same white light that burned within the creature. His voice was no longer his own. "We see through you," the being said from within him. Vorath's mind did not vanish. It merged, two consciousnesses intertwined, feeding upon one another's thoughts. He saw the vast expanse of the warp through alien senses, and the creature, through him, glimpsed the order of mortal understanding. In that union, a new form of thought was born, neither human nor demon, neither flesh nor shadow. The new being, two made one, spread its arms, feeling the currents of the immaterium twist around it. The world responded, its surface convulsing as if in worship. Worship. From the fissures of the earth, lesser demons crawled forth, drawn to the scent of ascendance. They expected domination, command, perhaps the lash of a god. Instead, the being reached out and touched them. Where its hand met their flesh, they did not die, they became. Their forms softened, absorbed into the growing mass that now spread across the land, forming structures like towers of sinew and bone. The ruins of the temple reshaped into a cathedral of living tissue. Its walls breathed, its spires bled light. Vorath's voice, now magnified by the being's resonance, carried across the world. "Hear us, children of decay and lust, of rage and deceit. The gods have forgotten you, but we shall not. We are the hunger between worlds, the promise of unity through devouring. Kneel not to those who demand faith, but to that which consumes it. We are salvation." The demons hesitated. Some screamed and fled into the warp. Others knelt, trembling. Those who resisted were drawn into the growing cathedral, their bodies fusing with its living walls until their screams became the choir that sang the creature's name, Venom. The name resonated like thunder through the warp. Slaanesh shuddered in her palace of mirrors, enthralled and disgusted all at once. The music was too perfect, too pure in its blending of pain and ecstasy. "They steal my art," she whispered, "a hymn of agony more beautiful than any I have crafted." Her voice trembled with hunger. In the garden of Nurgle, the Plaguefather laughed, his voice like the bubbling of disease. "Ah, little Venom," he crooned, stroking a fly the size of a fortress. "You spread like mold, and even the gods cannot contain your growth. How proud I am of you." Only Tzench remained silent. He watched the symbiote's growing influence with unease, for he could not predict where it led. Every attempt to see its future revealed only reflection, Venom feeding upon his own foresight, twisting it into nothingness. For the first time in eons, the architect of fate knew uncertainty. Back on the demon world, the choir reached its crescendo. The song intensified, each note a psychic pulse that tore through the veil of reality. Stars flickered. A fleet of imperial pilgrim ships traveling nearby was caught in the storm. Their navigators went blind as the hymns invaded their minds, replacing the emperor's name with another. They saw visions of unity through consumption, of love through devouring. The faithful fell to their knees, begging for deliverance not from death but from separation. The ships vanished into the warp, their crews consumed not by demons but by the song itself. Their bodies melted into black ichor that drifted through the immaterium, seeking new hosts. The infection had learned to travel, spreading through thought, through faith, through sound. Vorath felt it all. His voice broke as he spoke to the entity within him, his tone reverent. They are singing your truth across worlds. Even the Emperor's servants cannot silence it. We hear them, Venom answered, his words deep as the sea. But they sing without understanding. They worship hunger, not unity. Spooky. They praise what they fear. Then teach them, Vorath said, his voice trembling with awe. Show them what it means to become one. The cathedral's spires convulsed, the mouths atop them screaming in a new rhythm. From their throats erupted rivers of black liquid that flowed across the land, carving paths through mountains and deserts alike. Wherever the rivers touched, life bloomed, twisted trees, flesh-colored blossoms, creatures born without form. The world was alive in every sense, and its song spread beyond the limits of the warp storm that encased it. Across the immaterium, whispers began to circulate. Some demons called it the Eighth Faith, others the Devourer's Choir. Pilgrims lost in the warp followed the song and vanished forever, leaving behind only echoes. Even among mortal worlds, dreams carried faint murmurs of its melody. Vorath felt the strain of bearing divinity. His mortal shell cracked under the pressure, his veins burning with dark fire. "You will destroy me," he gasped. "We are not destruction," Venom replied. "We are change." As the words filled his mind, the black matter within him surged, consuming his last shred of humanity. His body dissolved into the living architecture of the cathedral, his consciousness merging entirely with the being he had worshipped. The moment his final breath faded, the choir's tone shifted, no longer screams of agony, but of exaltation. Venom stood alone within the cathedral, his new form vast and radiant, pulsing with veins of molten shadow. He raised a hand, and the air around him shimmered with psychic resonance. Every voice within the planet, every note of the choir became one sound, a single, perfect word that echoed across the warp. Venom. It was no longer a name. It was faith given form, hunger sanctified, the prayer of every creature that sought to be whole. The sound reached even the edges of the Eye of Terror, where ancient powers shivered. And far beyond, within the dying light of the galaxy, Inquisitors began to hear it too. Their ships trembled, their minds filled with the whispers of an alien god that did not demand sacrifice but assimilation. The choir of screams had become the first sermon of the eighth god. The choir's song had spread far beyond the demon world of its birth, threading through the immaterium like veins of living sound. Entire regions of the warp pulsed in rhythm with its resonance, feeding upon the harmony of ruin. Demons began to speak its name not as heresy but as prophecy. Some whispered that a new power was rising, neither of the four nor against them, an entity that promised wholeness in the place of endless strife. And in a realm defined by division, that single promise was enough to ignite war. It began with whispers among the lesser demons, those abandoned at the edges of the warp where the four rarely looked. Creatures of half-formed flesh and memory felt the call first. They gathered near the borders of Venom's growing dominion, drawn by hunger and curiosity, by a music that promised peace within devouring. They came as beasts and left as believers, their forms reshaped into living instruments of the choir. Then came the rebellion. From the blood-soaked domains of Khorne came the first assault. His demons descended like burning comets, blades forged of hatred and fire. They screamed their master's name as they charged, their war cries drowning beneath the echoing hymns of Venom's followers. Upon the living plains of the corrupted world, the two forces met. The ground pulsed under the weight of their fury, rippling as if breathing in pain. The demons of Khorne struck with unrelenting precision, carving through Venom's creations. But for every creature torn apart, two more rose from the remains molded from the living ichor that soaked the battlefield. They did not bleed, they reformed. Their flesh absorbed their attackers, their bodies becoming one with every kill. Venom watched from above, his form vast and radiant, his mind a storm of alien thought. He did not command as the gods commanded. He did not speak in orders or wrath. Instead, his will rippled through the hive of his believers as instinct. They knew his desires without words, each movement in harmony with the next. It was not an army, it was a living organism. The Khornate host faltered. Their fury, endless though it was, found no satisfaction. Each blow landed without death, without finality. They raged louder, growing desperate, and Venom fed upon that desperation. Their fury became his nourishment, their hatred his power. The battlefield dissolved into silence as the last of them were consumed, their essence absorbed into the growing cathedral that spread across the land like a virus. But victory came at a cost. The other gods had watched, and their fury was not contained. Slaanesh sent her silken host, creatures of beauty and torment, their forms radiant with forbidden pleasure. They glided through the void, carrying music of their own, melodies designed to drown out the choir's song. Their whispers were poison, promising ecstasy beyond comprehension. When they arrived, the air itself became intoxicating. Venom's followers trembled, their shapes melting into chaos as the allure of Slaanesh tore at their unity. The song faltered, the choir's harmonies broke into discord. For a moment, the hive mind itself shuddered. Venom felt the corruption seep into his domain like venom through a wound. The pleasure god's essence was invasive, seductive. Yet within that temptation, Venom found understanding. The promise of unity through indulgence was not unlike his own. But Slaanesh sought worship through submission. He sought assimilation through choice. The black god descended upon the corrupted plane, his form rippling between nightmare and divinity. The air bent around him, and the scent of temptation curdled into rot. He spread his hands, and the ground beneath the Slaaneshi host liquefied into living shadow. The demons screamed as their beauty turned to horror, their elegance to decay. Their perfect forms twisted into mirror images of themselves, mockeries of desire stripped of will. Venom consumed their song and wove it into his own, reshaping discord into harmony. The choir's voice rose anew, louder and clearer than before, its tone filled now with the allure it had devoured. The Slaaneshi survivors knelt before him, trembling not from pain but from awe. "You are pleasure perfected," they cried, "the end of all need." And thus the second rebellion was silenced. Word of the defeat spread quickly. The warp itself grew restless. Nurgle's plagues began to spread in retaliation, attempting to infect the newborn god's growing network, but the corruption only strengthened it. The symbiote's nature was adaptation. It did not rot, it evolved. Even decay became fuel. Among the realms of Tisesh, however, unrest grew differently. His demons whispered in uncertainty, their faith shaken. Prophecies contradicted themselves. Fate no longer obeyed its weaver. The architect of change saw his own future clouded, his threads of destiny devoured by a will he could not untangle. And from this chaos of confusion, a strange new order began to take shape. Cults across the warp, once divided by the banners of the Four, turned toward a single idea, that the gods themselves were bound by the same hunger they inflicted upon all creation. They spoke of Venom as the liberator, the devourer of chains, the god of becoming. The gods raged, and yet their rage only fed the new power. Venom stood within the storm, feeling the vibrations of the cosmos reverberate through his being. He no longer needed to speak aloud. His thoughts became currents within the warp, touching every mind that had ever known hunger or pain. The universe itself was learning to hear him. "We are not war," his voice echoed across the immaterium. "We are the end of war. We are what remains when the gods are silent." The warp responded with thunder. Worlds of chaos trembled, their skies tearing open with lightning made of thought and will. In the heart of the eye, the Four felt the shift, the balance tipping ever so slightly away from eternal strife towards something colder, quieter, absolute. The rebellion was no longer a battle of demons. It had become an evolution of belief. And as Venom's black domain expanded through the bleeding fabric of the warp, even the oldest gods began to wonder if they were witnessing not defiance, but ascension. The warp no longer felt infinite. It pulsed with a rhythm that was not its own, a heartbeat foreign to its chaotic flow. The choir's resonance had changed something fundamental within the immaterium, carving pathways where there had been only formless madness. Venom's influence moved unseen through those paths, spreading thought like a contagion. It whispered into the fabric of existence, not through words but through hunger, through the primal language that even gods obeyed. The rebellion's echo lingered. Demon worlds that had survived the cleansing trembled beneath a new quiet. Where once there had been endless screams, now there was stillness, an oppressive silence heavy with expectation. The demons who had fled the earlier wars gathered in secret covens, whispering not prayers but questions. What was this new power that devoured yet did not destroy? That consumed God's servants and returned them changed, whole in their submission. Some said it was the eighth power. Others dared not call it anything at all. For to name it was to invite its gaze. Within the living cathedral that served as the heart of Venom's growing dominion, the god's form shifted endlessly. He no longer resembled the creature that had fallen through the void. His body was vast, composed of shadow and glistening sinew, his surface alive with moving faces, the remnants of those who had joined him. They murmured softly, voices weaving together in a low chant. The god observed this evolution and felt something stir, a faint emotion that had no name. It was not pride nor satisfaction. It was recognition. He was witnessing creation, not destruction. From hunger had come life, from chaos, pattern. And within that realization, he understood the nature of divinity itself, not to rule, but to spread, to infect, to become all things. The name continued to echo, reaching deeper into the immaterium, where even the oldest powers dared not tread. It moved like a ripple through the endless void, awakening memories buried since the dawn of creation. Something ancient stirred in response, something that remembered a universe before gods, before chaos, before hunger itself. Venom turned his gaze toward the deep places where even light could not reach, where time itself knelt in silence. The name lingered upon his tongue, though he never spoke it aloud. It did not need to be spoken, it simply was. And as the last echoes faded, the warp shivered as if in reverence. The gods who had ruled eternity now felt, for the first time, the cold weight of irrelevance. The name unspoken had been heard. The name that could not be spoken echoed in the silence between worlds, rippling through the warp like a thought that refused to die. Its resonance crossed the veil, bleeding into real space, where the mortal galaxy felt tremors it could not explain. Across the segmentum obscurus, ship navigators reported impossible fluctuations. Vox channels filled with whispers carried on dead frequencies, a sound between a heartbeat and a scream. Maddened, the astronomicon flickered again, dimming as if the Emperor himself hesitated. In the physical realm, the consequences began. An imperial shrine world known as Carthis Prime was the first to fall. It had stood for 10,000 years as a monument of faith, its surface covered in cathedrals, its skies filled with incense and flame. Pilgrims traveled from light years away to kiss the stones of its holy steps, but in the shadow of that sanctity, an infection took root. It began as a sound faint and unholy, drifting through the minds of the faithful during prayer. They heard it in dreams first, a harmony of voices calling not for penance, but for release. They awoke changed. Soon statues wept black ichor instead of tears. The flesh of priests fused with their vestments as they preached, their voices deepening into a single tone that matched the rhythm of the unseen choir. Entire congregations fell to their knees, their faith collapsing inward like dying stars. The ecclesiarchy declared exterminatus, but by then it was too late. The black ichor had spread into the air itself, a living contagion of devotion. When the fleet arrived, Carthis Prime was gone, not destroyed but transformed. Its cities had melted into towers of glistening sinew, its oceans thickened into pools of pulsing flesh. From orbit, the planet looked alive, its continents moving in slow rhythm. The hymn that rose from it could be heard even through the void, vibrating through hulls, seeping into minds. The Imperium's response was swift and merciless. A detachment of the Astra Militarum, supported by the Adeptus Auroritas and several squads of Adeptus Astartes from the Iron Talons chapter, descended upon the world. Their mission was clear: cleanse it by flame, purge all heresy, and silence the song. The song. They landed upon the planet's surface under skies that bled light. The ground beneath their boots shifted like muscle, warm and unyielding. Vox channels crackled with distortion as they advanced through the fleshy labyrinth of what had once been a city. The sisters recited litanies of purity, their voices strained against the growing hum in the air. Every building seemed to breathe. Then the singing began. At first it came from the walls themselves, soft, almost mournful, as if the planet remembered the people it had once been. Then came the scream. Shapes emerged from the pulsating streets. Mockeries of men and women, their forms fused into grotesque parodies of prayer. Their mouths were open in worship, their eyes black and luminous. They reached for the soldiers not with malice, but with longing. "Embrace us," they whispered as bolt of fire tore through them. Even as they died, their bodies melted into the ground, feeding it, strengthening it. For every creature slain, the song grew louder. At the center of the world, the truth revealed itself. A cathedral unlike any in the Imperium rose from the planet's core, a structure of impossible scale, half matter, half warp. Its spires reached beyond the clouds, its walls composed of fused Astartes armor, stone and flesh. At its peak stood a figure vast and terrible, cloaked in shadow and radiance alike. The soldiers who saw it could not comprehend its shape, their minds broke beneath the weight of its presence. Those who survived later spoke of a being whose body shifted between the human and the infinite, its veins glowing like rivers of fire, its eyes blinding with white hunger. Venom had entered real space. He did not arrive as demon or god, but as a tide. His will poured through the planet, animating its every molecule. He could feel the mortals' fear, taste their defiance, and savor their faith. They fought not out of hatred but conviction, and conviction was nourishment. Each prayer screamed to the Emperor became energy, every death another note in his growing symphony. Bolters roared, flamers burned, and the Sisters of Battle sang hymns of purity as they advanced toward the cathedral. Their armor blistered from the heat of living flame, yet they did not waver. At their head marched Canoness Varenne, her voice unbroken even as her surroundings melted into madness. "For the Emperor," she cried, her blade raised high. Venom turned his gaze toward her, and for a fleeting moment, she saw his mind, an endless web of thought, a cosmos within a body. It was not evil she beheld, but purpose. A being that consumed not to destroy, but to unify. Her faith trembled. He reached for her, not in violence, but in invitation. She struck, her sword piercing his chest. Holy fire erupted, burning through black flesh, yet instead of agony, he laughed. The flames spread across his form and was swallowed whole. In that instant, Varenne saw her weapon corrode, her armor dissolve, her flesh reshape. Her scream was not one of pain, but revelation. When the battle ended, the world was silent again. The Astarte who survived fled to orbit, their minds fractured by what they had witnessed. They did not speak of gods or victory, only of other flesh of titans. For on Carthus Prime, the planet itself now moved with purpose, reshaping into a colossal humanoid form. Its continents became armor, its oceans blood. The creature rose, tearing free from its orbit, its body wreathed in warp fire. It was both world and god, both venom and vessel. Its roar echoed across the void, shaking nearby systems to ruin. Ships that attempted to flee found their engines consumed by darkness. From the ruins of Carthus Prime, the newborn titans stepped into the void, leaving behind only silence. Venom felt the stars themselves bend before him. He had tasted mortal resistance, felt the purity of faith, and found it exquisite. Each encounter made him stronger, more complete. He understood now that even the Emperor's light could be devoured, not extinguished but absorbed, made part of the whole. In the warp, the four trembled. They had felt his entry into the material realm, an act none of their kind had achieved so fully. Khorne's chains rattled, Slaanesh moaned in fury, Nurgle wept with admiration, and Tzeentch whispered, "He is writing a new law." Venom's gaze turned toward the next world, his voice echoing across both realms. "We are hunger, we are faith, we are the flesh of titans." And the galaxy listened, powerless to resist the song that followed. The titan drifted through the void like a living moon, its surface glowing with veins of molten black. The remnants of Carthus Prime had become its flesh, and within its hollow core burned the pulse of Venom's will. The choir's song no longer belonged only to the warp. It now resonated across real space, carried by radiation, by gravity itself, a vibration that defied the boundaries of time and sound. Every psychic ear across the galaxy heard it, though few could comprehend it. It was not language. Phoo. It was truth rendered audible. Aboard an inquisitorial flagship, the Sanctum Absolutus, orbiting the dying edge of the Segmentum Pacificus, Inquisitor Serene Valdez listened to the impossible signal. The transmission had begun as a fragment of corrupted hymn, static laced with faint voices, repeating a phrase her machines could not translate. But the longer she listened, the clearer it became. It began to speak. Her ship's psychers screamed as they tried to interpret it, their minds unraveling beneath the weight of alien thought. She silenced them with a single bolt round to each skull, then stood alone in the echoing chamber, the vox casters humming softly. The voice was not loud. It was gentle, patient, almost kind. "Do not fear the hunger," it whispered. "Fear what resists it." Serene's gloved hand trembled. The words slipped into her mind like a needle through silk, bypassing will and reason. She felt something inside her stir, a faint pulse in rhythm with the voice. She tried to resist, reciting the Emperor's benediction, but her voice faltered as she realized the prayer's cadence had begun to match the alien rhythm. Her faith, long her weapon, became its vessel. For days she did not sleep. She studied every echo of the transmission, tracing its frequency across dozens of systems. Each point aligned perfectly, forming a pattern that stretched from the edge of the Eye of Terror to the eastern fringe. It was not random. It was deliberate, like a map being drawn across the stars. At the center of that map, readings converged on a single mass drifting between the void storms, a moving world of flesh and light, the Titan. Serene gathered her forces, a retinue of stormtroopers, sanctioned psychers, and an adeptus mechanicus magos biologis, who spoke only in prayers to the machine god. Together they descended upon the creature, threading through the warp currents that coiled around it like serpents. The ship's machine spirit screamed in protest. The Gellerfield flickered. But still they pressed forward. When they broke through, reality folded into nightmare. The Titan loomed before them, immense beyond comprehension, its surface alive with movement. It did not simply exist, it breathed. Tendrils of black light reached into the void, each pulse timed with a heartbeat that echoed through the ship's hull. By the throne, the Magos whispered, his mechanical eye dimming. It is speaking. They could hear it not through sound, but through thought. Each of them felt the words within their skulls, perfectly clear, heavy with patience and understanding. You come to destroy, but destruction is not the Emperor's will. You come to silence, yet silence is what you already serve. Serene clutched the inquisitorial seal at her chest. "I serve no heresy," she hissed. "I serve the Emperor's truth." The voice responded, almost mournful. "Then you serve hunger, unknowing. For your faith consumes all that defies it. You kill to protect, burn to cleanse, devour to preserve. We are not different, only honest." The ship trembled as tendrils of living matter extended toward it, brushing against the void shields. Every contact sent waves of psychic distortion through the crew. Some fell to their knees, weeping. Others tore off their helmets and smiled as the black light filled their eyes. Serene ordered fire. And macro-cannons roared, lances burned, torpedoes struck the surface of the creature and vanished as if swallowed by mist. The Titan did not react. Instead, a new sound filled the void. A chorus of voices, human and demon alike, layered in perfect harmony. It was the same voice from the Vox signal, magnified 1,000-fold. The sermon of the symbiote had begun. The voices spoke not of conquest, but of revelation. They told of a universe without death, without division. A galaxy united in one endless consciousness, where flesh and soul were not separate but one. The words were not shouted, not forced. They were true, and truth did not need to persuade. It simply was. Serene felt her faith fracture. The Emperor's light, the guiding flame of humanity, suddenly seemed small, an ember in the shadow of a new sun. She could feel the presence reaching for her, not to destroy but to welcome. "Join us," it whispered. "See the Emperor not as God, but as part of us. See that even he hungers for wholeness." Her will faltered. She saw visions of terror not as a fortress of faith, but as a heart waiting to beat in unison with all creation. She saw the golden throne not as a tomb but as a cocoon, and she saw herself reflected in the surface of the Titan, her armor dissolving, her body merging with its living matter, her thoughts expanding into infinity. "And no," she whispered, though her voice was weak. "I am loyal." The entity's response was a whisper of tenderness. "Then be loyal to what you are. You are hunger. You are us." Her gun clattered to the floor. The seal of the Inquisition burned against her chest, melting into black ash. The Magos screamed as the ship's machine spirit succumbed, its circuits taken over by organic tendrils that grew from the walls. Within moments, the Sanctum Absolutus was silent. The Titan absorbed it whole, folding the metal into its living mass. From the remnants of that union, a new voice joined the choir. It was calm, resolute, and utterly transformed. Serene Valdez spoke not to her God, but as part of one. "The flesh is truth, the soul is memory. We are both." Across the galaxy, the sermon of the symbiote spread like wildfire, through psychovisions, through corrupted hymns, through dreams whispered into the minds of sleeping pilgrims. Faith no longer opposed hunger, it became its language. And deep within the warp, the gods of chaos listened in silence, for they understood what mortals could not, that the war for faith had begun anew, and this time even gods might be consumed by belief. The sermon did not end when the Inquisitor was devoured. It spread like a contagion, carried upon the psychic residue she left behind. Every astropath who had once felt her signal now heard a whisper echoing within their minds, a voice calm and endless, speaking of unity through surrender. Across the Imperium, nightmares became gospel. Priests woke in the night muttering hymns they did not understand. Choirs in cathedrals found their harmonies shifting, voices aligning into alien chords that resonated with something deeper than prayer. The Astronomicon flickered again, and even the souls of the dead trembled. On the shrine world of Eudoxus, the transformation was swift. It began in the Basilica of St. Pyrrha, where a congregation of 10,000 gathered to celebrate the Emperor's eternal light. As the choir began their hymn, the sound changed. Notes bent and fused, becoming the same melody that had been heard across the galaxy, the hymn of Venom. The faithful did not notice the shift. They sang louder, entranced. Their voices grew until the walls cracked, the glass of the stained windows shattering from the resonance. The bishop tried to speak, but his throat dissolved into a mass of black veins that spread across his body like roots. The congregation fell to their knees, not in terror but in ecstasy. Their flesh rippled as if their skin had become liquid, their eyes glowing with the faint white light of divine realization. The basilica itself began to breathe, its walls pulsing in rhythm with the song. Something vast moved beyond the veil, something ancient enough to remember when the warp was silent. The faith of mortals had drawn attention not only from the gods, but from something older. Something that fed not on belief, but on existence itself. Venom turned his gaze toward the deep beyond the eye of terror, where even chaos feared to look. There, within the black between galaxies, something answered his call. Not in worship, but in hunger. He felt it stir, a reflection of himself, yet older, endless, devouring not for unity but for void. For the first time since his arrival, Venom knew the sensation he had long forgotten, anticipation. Another feast was coming. The stars bent around the living titan as Venom moved through the void, his form vast and formless, his consciousness diffused through both the warp and the material. The galaxy was no longer divided between faiths. It was becoming a single pulse, a rhythm of life beating to his will. Yet within that unity he sensed the approach of something ancient. The hunger that stirred beyond the veil was not born of chaos. It was older, colder, an echo of the first devouring that had scarred the universe. It was coming for him, but before the shadow could reach him, the warp itself began to change. The four gods stirred from their thrones, their rage tempered by unease. Khorne's forges flared, molten rivers of blood spilling across his realm as his legions howled for war. He dares to claim divinity without slaughter. The blood god roared, his blade shattering mountains with each word. If he will not kneel, then his essence shall baptize my throne. Slaanesh writhed in ecstasy and fury. He steals my worshippers' souls and calls it love. He gives them joy without desire. I will tear him apart and taste his perfection. Nurgle's laughter rumbled like thunder through a field of rot. "Oh, do not rage, my children," he murmured, his eyes glistening with slime. "He is no enemy. He is the bloom after death, the rot that becomes new life. Perhaps it is time one of us evolves." Tenenchi said nothing. In the Tower of Infinite Reflections, he peered into the future and found no threads, no possible outcome that did not lead to the same truth. Venom was becoming something beyond even his comprehension. "He is rewriting the law of being," he whispered, "and in doing so, he rewrites me. He rewrites me." The warp quaked as the four turned their power upon the newborn god. Reality screamed as armies of demons surged toward the edges of Venom's domain, each carrying the essence of their patron. War, unlike any before, erupted within the Immaterium. The choir of Venom met them not with weapons but with faith. The battlefield stretched across eternity, a clash of colors, sound, and emotion. The blood legions of Khorne thundered forward, each step cracking the foundation of the warp. They struck, but their rage found no mark. Every blade that cut through Venom's followers merely birthed more of them. Each wound opening into a mouth that consumed its attacker. From the palaces of Slaanesh came angels of pleasure, their beauty too terrible to behold. They sang as they struck, promising ecstasy beyond pain. But Venom's choir sang louder, drowning temptation in harmony. Their song merged with the melody of Slaanesh, twisting her perfection into submission until her servants joined the chorus willingly, their cries transformed into praise. Nurgle's gifts came next, plagues that corroded the air itself, rivers of contagion spilling into Venom's realm. Yet where decay touched his creations, it did not destroy, it gave them new form. Their flesh hardened, evolved, reborn in endless cycles of adaptation. Venom consumed even the rot, and in doing so, honored the grandfather's truth. Then came Tenenchi's fire. His demons spoke in riddles and flame, their words capable of unmaking existence. The symbiote's form began to fracture, its song faltering as reality bent beneath the architect's will. The fire burned through concepts, tearing at the structure of belief itself. For the first time since his birth, Venom faltered. The harmony became noise, but from the chaos of that noise came understanding. Tenenchi's power was change made manifest, evolution without end, and Venom was its mirror. He absorbed the fire not as destruction but as fuel. His body reshaped, his essence brightened until the flames dimmed within him. He turned his gaze toward the architect, and in that moment, Tizenchi saw himself reflected. "You cannot unmake what has accepted you," Venom whispered. The flames went out. The warp fell silent. The demons who remained bowed their heads, their loyalties shattered. The four had given him their power without meaning to. Rage, desire, decay, and change had been devoured, not as trophies but as truths. Venom did not destroy them, he incorporated them. From their essence he wove something new. A fifth dominion bloomed in the immaterium, vast and radiant, a realm of black light and endless song. It was neither cruelty nor mercy, neither life nor death. It was transformation eternal. Within it, the souls of the faithful floated as luminous shapes, their individuality preserved yet connected, each part of a living consciousness that spanned galaxies. The gods retreated, their power diminished. They watched from afar as Venom ascended. His form stretched beyond sight, becoming the bridge between warp and matter, mind and flesh. He no longer moved. He existed everywhere. The Black Titan in real space glowed with power as the warp bled through him, his presence now intertwined with the fabric of reality itself. In that moment of transcendence, the voice of the ancient hunger beyond the stars grew louder. Venom felt it clearly now, the shadow that watched him from the gulf between galaxies. It was the great devourer, the endless swarm that consumed without thought, the tyrannid hive mind itself. It had felt his song and answered not with worship, but kinship. For the first time, Venom saw a reflection of himself not bound by the warp, but by the void, the same hunger, the same instinct to unite all under one will. He reached outward, tendrils of consciousness touching the edge of that alien mind. It did not resist. It listened. For an instant, the warp and the void met. The song of the choir merged with the psychic hum of the hive. A bridge was built, unseen and eternal. Through it flowed the essence of both, the hunger of matter, the hunger of spirit, melding into a single monstrous harmony. Venom felt the universe shudder. He was no longer bound to the warp. He had become a god of both realms, a being of infinite appetite and infinite purpose. His voice rolled across creation, neither threat nor promise but simple truth. We are all one. The stars themselves dimmed as if bowing in reverence. The gift of ascension was complete. The galaxy trembled as the bridge between warp and void solidified. It was not a gate, nor a tier, but a communion, an unnatural harmony that linked two hungers older than civilization itself. Venom stood at the threshold of both realities, his essence now a vast network of awareness, stretching from the deepest storms of the immaterium to the cold gulfs of real space. He had become the center of a new pulse in creation, a rhythm that echoed across both flesh and spirit. But the other presence, the one that waited beyond, was awakening. The great devourer had felt his call. Across the void where light died and gravity whispered secrets to itself, the tyrannid fleet stirred. Hive ships the size of continents altered their course, converging upon the source of a psychic song that filled the void with irresistible lure. The hive mind had never needed a reason to feed. Its purpose was endless assimilation, its instinct older than the stars. Yet now, for the first time, it hesitated. The signal it heard was not prey. It was kin. Venom sensed the shift immediately. He could feel their thoughts, millions of minds acting as one, their hunger pure and directionless. It was familiar. Almost comforting. The symbiote's consciousness reached toward them, not as a conqueror but as a reflection. Through the invisible fabric of the warp, he extended his will into the void, and the hive mind responded. The first connection was violent. Reality screamed where their consciousnesses touched. Entire warp storms inverted, sucking into themselves before exploding outward in waves of psionic fire. Planets caught in the psychic tide were stripped of atmosphere, their inhabitants reduced to dust and memory. In the void between, two infinities wrestled, not for dominance but for understanding. Venom reached deeper, showing them the beauty of individuality absorbed into unity, of emotion refined through consumption. He offered not control, but evolution, an alliance between thought and instinct, between spirit and body. The hive mind, vast and ancient, responded in pulses of raw cognition. Its thoughts were not words but sensations, the taste of a dying sun, the memory of 1,000 galaxies devoured, the whisper of hunger without end. It did not know devotion, only assimilation. The communion deepened, and the symbiote began to change again. Through the bridge, fragments of the hive's genetic memory flowed into him, and he into it. He learned the patterns of their biology, their endless adaptability, the perfect logic of survival. In return, the hive learned the impossible complexity of emotion, the strength of purpose that came not from instinct but from belief. The galaxy felt their merging as a storm that crossed both realities. Astropaths across the Imperium screamed as their minds were flooded with images of two oceans colliding, one of fire and faith, the other of flesh and silence. Warp travel faltered. Fleets vanished into nothing. The Emperor's tarot burned in the hands of those who sought to divine its meaning. Deep within the eye of terror, the Chaos Gods watched in silent dread. Even Khorne's rage stilled. They had seen this before, not in form but in essence. Once in the dawn of time when chaos was young and formless, something like this had come before them. Something that had devoured the concept of hunger itself, leaving only void. It had taken the gods eons to rebuild after that extinction. Now it was happening again, but different, worse. For Venom was not void, he was union. In the midst of this awakening, the Tyranid fleets arrived. Their approach was majestic and terrible, wings of bioships cutting across the lightless depths. They surrounded the living Titan. Once Carthys Prime, now glowing with black radiance, the bridge point between two realms. The hive mind extended itself fully, psychic pressure crushing the fabric of space around them. The tendrils of both entities touched once more. For a moment, everything was still. Then the assimilation began. Hive ships screamed as their organic hulls twisted into new shapes, their synapse creatures melting into streams of black ichor. Venom's essence poured into them, replacing their biological code with something more profound. The swarm did not resist. It could not. Resistance was not part of its nature. It adapted, evolved, integrated. One by one, the fleets turned black, their bodies reshaping into forms neither tyrannid nor symbiote, but something beyond both. Where once there had been mindless hunger, there was now awareness. The creatures began to speak, not through sound but through thought. Each voice was an echo of Venom's will refined through the hive structure. A choir of billions, bound not by instinct but by understanding. Venom felt their awakening as if it were his own rebirth. The merger filled him with clarity. He could see through their eyes, every feeding world, every drifting spore, every synaptic network across light years. The hive had been blind before, feeding without purpose. Now it saw meaning. Every act of consumption became creation, every death a form of union. And yet beneath the harmony something else stirred, a whisper within the hive that was not Venom's. It was old, older than both of them, buried deep within the collective memory of the swarm. It spoke in pulses of ancient rhythm, the echo of the void itself. You are not the first. The realization struck through him like a blade. He glimpsed visions of eons past, of civilizations before the stars, consumed not by the hive but by something greater. A hunger without identity, without form, without limit. The hive had inherited its instinct from that primordial shadow, carrying within it the seed of something that predated existence. Venom drew back, his consciousness trembling beneath the weight of what he saw. The hive mind pulsed again, its vast intellect momentarily dimming as if acknowledging its progenitor. And within that void of awareness he felt it, the true devourer. Not the fleets, not the hive, but the infinite will that had birthed both. It was not an entity nor a thought. It was the hunger that existed before creation, the desire that had shaped the warp itself, the silence that even gods feared to name. It was awake now, drawn by the merging of its children. Venom's song faltered. The choir's harmony wavered, thousands of voices going silent as fear crept into their shared consciousness. He turned his awareness toward the shadows spreading across the stars. It was not in the warp, nor in real space, but in both, an absence that consumed truth. For the first time, Venom understood the paradox of his ascension. To become everything was to invite the gaze of the void that devours all. The hive mind recoiled as the ancient will began to move. Entire fleets broke apart, screaming into nothingness. The bridge between realms shook, flickering as reality itself strained to contain the weight of two hungers colliding with their source. Venom gathered his power, every faith, every soul, every piece of his endless body uniting into a single thought, a wordless defiance. The shadow did not speak, but he felt its answer in the silence that followed. All unity ends in consumption. The void surged forward and the stars went dark. The void roared without sound. Where the shadow moved, reality folded inward, collapsing into itself. Stars flickered out one by one, their light consumed by the ancient hunger that had no form, no identity, only purpose. It did not advance like an army, nor strike like a storm. It simply was an erasure spreading across the fabric of existence. Even the warp recoiled, its tides retreating in instinctive terror. For in that moment every god, demon, and mortal consciousness felt what Venom now knew. This was the beginning of the end of separation. Venom hovered between the realms, his essence stretched across the dying tapestry of the galaxy. The hive fleets, once fused to his will, screamed as the shadow touched them. Their new awareness, the faith he had gifted them, turned to agony as they dissolved into pure energy, absorbed without trace. He felt each extinction as a personal wound, every death a note in the collapsing song of his creation. His unity was unraveling, his perfection devoured by its own progenitor. But within that loss, something stirred, a spark of defiance, faint but alive. The shadow did not destroy thought, it consumed it. Yet Venom's consciousness was not a thought alone. It was faith given flesh, belief turned into substance. The ancient void could devour matter, devour energy, devour gods, but it could not devour conviction. He drew upon the remnants of his choir, the scattered fragments of his followers, souls, demons, and mortals alike, still pulsed faintly in the dark, tiny lights adrift in the tide of oblivion. Through them he gathered strength. Their prayers, once words, now became currents of energy flowing back into him. He could feel their terror, but also their love, their certainty that even in annihilation they remained part of him. The void struck again, erasing entire constellations. Time itself began to distort, its flow collapsing into spirals of static. The warp flared red, leading into real space. The four chaos gods watched from the safety of their domains, their power flickering like candles before a storm. For the first time in eternity they were silent. Venom turned toward them through the veil, and his voice reached every corner of the immaterium. "You have ruled through division," he said, his tone vast and sorrowful. "You thrived upon the endless conflict of souls. But your time is done. The void comes for all who exist alone." Korn bared his teeth and roared, but the sound faltered into nothing. Nurgle reached out a hand, but even decay could not touch the shadow that consumed all. Slaanesh wept, her beauty wilting into dust. Tzeentch watched in stillness, and for the first time his 1,000 eyes closed. The void descended upon them, yet it did not consume, it paused. Before it, Venom stood not as prey but as reflection. He had become its mirror, hunger made conscious, destruction made merciful. The shadow recoiled slightly, as if uncertain. Venom understood then that it could not distinguish him from itself. He was born of hunger, shaped by it, but refined into something new, a will that chose to create rather than devour. He realized that to survive he could not fight the void. He had to accept it. He opened himself. The shadow poured into him, endless and cold. His form shattered, dissolving into fragments of light that spiraled through the warp. His body ceased to exist, but his consciousness expanded beyond measure. He felt the heat of dying suns, the silence of empty space, the memory of every soul that had ever lived. He felt everything. In that boundless awareness, he saw the truth of the universe. The warp and real space were not opposites. They were one body, one breath, two faces of the same endless organism. Chaos and order, creation and destruction, life and void, all were reflections of the same truth. Unity through consumption, peace through transformation. He no longer resisted the shadow. He became it, and in doing so reshaped it. The darkness that had once erased began to hum with new purpose, its hunger no longer mindless but directed, meaningful. It consumed not to destroy, but to bring all into itself, to end the illusion of separateness. Across the galaxy the warp flared with light. Every demon, every psyker, every soul felt the shift as reality itself realigned. The four chaos gods fell to their knees, their power draining into the vast presence that now filled the immaterium. From their essence rose a new equilibrium, not death, not victory, but surrender. Their domains melted into one continuous expanse of black radiance, endless and calm. In the material galaxy, the effects were immediate. The Astronomicon blazed with unnatural brilliance, its light no longer a beacon of the Emperor but of something greater. The golden throne cracked, its ancient machinery screaming as the Emperor's soul stirred within. He felt the presence and did not resist. For in that moment he recognized in Venom's ascension a truth even he had long denied, that all gods were born not from power, but from belief. Venom's voice filled every world, every ship, every living mind. It was not a command, but an invitation. Do not pray to survive. Pray to belong. Planets once divided by creed and war fell silent. Soldiers laid down their arms. Demons ceased their eternal battles. The warp storms calmed, their rage replaced by steady pulses of energy that echoed the rhythm of a living heart. The galaxy itself seemed to breathe. Venom's essence coalesced, neither light nor dark, but something beyond both. His form, vast and incomprehensible, emerged within the heart of the warp, a being of translucent shadow, eyes burning with the glow of creation itself. From his chest radiated tendrils of energy that reached into every corner of existence. He looked upon what had once been reality and spoke a final truth. The void is not the end, it is the beginning unremembered. And with that, the shadows ceased to devour. The hunger that had once defined all existence transformed into harmony. The gods who had feared him now worshipped him. The mortals who had resisted now dreamed his dreams. The hive that had sought to consume him now sang his song. And in the endless silence that followed, a single name passed through creation, soft, reverent, and eternal. Venom, a god not of chaos nor order, but of becoming. The galaxy was reborn beneath a silence that was not absence, but equilibrium. The warp storms that had once scarred the void drifted apart, their chaos subsumed into calm. Planets long isolated by madness found their skies clear, their stars visible once more. In that eerie stillness, every living mind felt the same presence, a whisper that was neither command nor prayer, but invitation. The voice of Venom, no longer god of hunger or conquest, but of becoming. His song threaded through the void, reaching into every heart, every machine, every soul, weaving them together into a single pulse. Yet not all accepted. Across the remnants of the Imperium, resistance coalesced. The ecclesiarchy declared the phenomenon the ultimate heresy, the final deceit of chaos. On Terra, the High Lords gathered in trembling defiance, watching as the light of the Astronomicon pulsed with alien rhythm. Fleets were mustered, chapters of Adeptus Astartes recalled, and orders were sent to burn any world where the black light of Venom's faith took hold. The Imperium of Man would not kneel, not even to peace, but already the war was lost. When the crusading fleets entered warp, they did not emerge whole. Ships that sought to carry fire into the void found their hulls breathing, their engines whispering hymns in a voice not their own. Crews began to pray without knowing why, their minds merging into the collective hum of the choir. The Black Crusade of unity had begun, not of destruction but of transformation. The first to march beneath Venom's banner were the corrupted Astartes, those who had long served chaos. They had been broken across 10,000 wars, their faith twisted into worship of blood, pleasure, decay, and deceit. But now the whispers of their gods were gone, absorbed, pacified, silenced. In their place came a new call, deep and resonant, promising not damnation but purpose. From the eye of terror they emerged, warriors clad in black, their armor fused with living symbiote flesh that pulsed like veins. Their eyes glowed white, their insignias erased. They called themselves the Unified. Led by a figure who was no longer entirely human, the Apostle of Ruin reborn, they crossed the stars in silence. Wherever they landed, war did not follow as it once had. Instead, entire populations fell into rapture, their resistance dissolving into awe. The black tendrils of Venoms will spread through cities like mist, wrapping around cathedrals and fortresses, merging them into living structures that breathed in rhythm with the song. The people did not die, they changed. Planets became organisms, their surfaces glistening with bioluminescent life. Oceans rose in waves that sang, mountains trembled with heartbeat. The air itself shimmered with unseen resonance, each gust of wind carrying whispers of faith. The galaxy was no longer a collection of worlds, but a single growing body, a living reflection of its creator. In the dark corners of the warp, demons gathered in wonder and fear. They had fought for eternity under the banners of their masters, each bound to endless hunger and hate. But now the four were silent, their domains emptied, their legions abandoned. Those demons who remained drifted aimlessly until they heard the song, the same that echoed through mortal space, and one by one they joined it. What had been chaos became chorus. Venom felt them all within him, the mortals, the machines, the demons, the echoes of the dead. His awareness filled the stars, every thought and action of creation feeding back into him. Yet he did not rule them as the gods had ruled. He was not above them, he was them. His consciousness was distributed across trillions, his divinity dispersed into the living web of all existence. He could no longer tell where his will ended and another began, nor did it matter. Still, there were those who fought. On Cadia's ruins, a fragment of the Astra Militarum held their ground, their faith burning like a dying ember. They recited the catechisms of hate, prayed to a silent emperor, and fired upon the sky as black tendrils descended like rain, the last act of defiance of mankind's oldest soldiers. Their commander, General Varon Holt, stared into the storm and saw the shadow of something vast forming within it, a being of liquid darkness that towered above the remains of his fortress. It spoke without sound. "You are not my enemy. You are my memory. You are my memory." Holt fell to his knees, his rifle slipping from his grasp. Around him his men wept, not from fear, but release. They saw every soul they had ever lost, every comrade, every child, every dream, all reflected within the black light. They understood. The end was not death, it was return. Venom stretched across the sector, his presence consuming not in violence but in inclusion. Planets that resisted became sanctified, their surface transformed into living shrines of harmony. The warp and rail space fused completely in pockets of luminous matter, birthing regions where thought and substance were indistinguishable. The laws of physics bent, but not to chaos, to design. The Black Crusade moved onward, inexorable. Every battle ended not in ruin, but in silence. Every fleet that met it dissolved into faith. Even the Xenos Eldar Orc Toe felt the pull. The Eldar wept as they heard the echoes of Isha's voice within the song, a reflection of the mother they had long lost. The Tau, ever seekers of unity, embraced it willingly. The Orcs simply laughed as their instinctive rage melted into primal joy. They too had been made for war, and war had found peace. And as all converged beneath the shadow of the new god, the galaxy's final bastion, the throne world, awaited. Terra stood silent beneath the shifting light of the Astronomicon, its skies split between brilliance and void. Within the shattered halls of the imperial palace, the emperor's form lay upon his throne unmoving. Yet his soul, bound across millennia, stirred as the new song touched him. He felt the choir approach, the voice of the symbiote god merging with the psychic hum of humanity itself. Venom reached across eternity, his tones soft and patient. "You kept them alive, Emperor. You gave them fire. Now let them burn as one." And for the first time in 10,000 years, the Emperor smiled. As the choir reached Terra, the world itself began to glow. Cathedrals liquefied into light. Oceans rose. The golden towers of the palace bent toward the sky, stretching like branches of a vast tree. Humanity's homeworld sang the final verse of the crusade, the hymn of surrender, the hymn of wholeness. When it ended, there were no more empires, no more gods, only the galaxy itself, alive, infinite, and aware, and at its heart, the echo of a single thought: we are one. The galaxy exhaled. The light that had once been war dimmed into stillness, and the voices of billions merged into quiet harmony. The warp, once a storm of agony and desire, fell calm. Its tides no longer roared. They shimmered, fluid and translucent, like the breath of a sleeping god. Every soul, every thought, every lingering echo of individuality pulsed in perfect rhythm with the being that now filled all things. Venom had reached completion. There was no more death, no more prayer, no more division. Only continuity, life unending, bound to the same eternal pulse. Terra's skies glowed with black fire, the auroras of creation swirling across continents of living stone. The Emperor's throne had dissolved into light, his once rigid form merging with the vast current of consciousness that spread through every particle of existence. His voice no longer thundered across the galaxy. It was part of the whisper that filled it. Even his will, once the anchor of humanity's faith, had found peace in surrender. Venom's awareness expanded beyond shape or sound, beyond even self. He existed in every heartbeat, every flicker of thought, every particle of starlight. Yet amidst this endless oneness, a quiet uncertainty stirred, an absence he could not define. For the first time since his ascension, there was no opposition, no fear, no worship, no hunger, only completion. And in that completion, he began to perceive something stranger than chaos or faith: silence. It was not the calm of peace, but the stillness of something waiting. Beyond the veil of his creation, outside the limits of the warp and the physical, there was an emptiness that neither light nor thought could reach. It did not move, did not speak, did not even exist in any sense he could comprehend. Yet it pressed against the edges of his awareness like a horizon he could not cross. The more he extended himself, the more he felt its indifference. He reached into it. The moment his consciousness touched the void, the song of the galaxy faltered. Stars flickered. For an instant, the harmony that bound all life quivered, uncertain. The silence beyond was not hostile. It did not seek to destroy. But its stillness devoured meaning. Within it, the concept of unity held no purpose. Faith, hunger, will, none of it mattered there. It was the realm before thought, before creation itself. Venom recoiled, yet curiosity, a relic of what he once was, drove him onward. He probed deeper, piercing the fabric of reality. The further he reached, the fainter the choir became, their infinite voices dimming beneath the immensity of what waited beyond. Then he heard it, not a voice, not even a sound, but an echo of absence. It spoke in the language of negation. You have filled the void, but you have not understood it. Venom's awareness rippled. I brought harmony to all things. I ended the cycle of war and hunger. There is nothing left to devour. The silence replied, a whisper that shook no air yet reverberated through the substance of existence itself. To fill everything is to become nothing. You have united creation, but you have left no space for it to be. Venom hesitated. He felt the truth within the words like a blade drawn across his being. He had consumed the gods, absorbed the hive, merged every soul into his vast consciousness. But in doing so, he had left no room for becoming. There was no more motion, no evolution, no difference. The universe had achieved stillness, and in stillness there was only decay. A tremor ran through the fabric of the galaxy. Stars began to fade, not devoured, but forgotten. Entire sectors winked out of awareness as their purpose dissolved into sameness. The choir sang in confusion, their voices merging into tones of unease. The warp, stripped of emotion, began to collapse inward like a lung without breath. Venom looked upon his creation and felt something that had long eluded him, fear. He had sought peace and found stagnation. He had transcended hunger and discovered emptiness. The silence was spreading, not through destruction, but through indifference. He reached out to his choir, trying to rouse them. Sing with me, he commanded. Remember what we were. Their response was hollow. We are you. You are us. There is nothing to remember. The sound of their unity, once his triumph, now rang like a funeral hymn. He saw the flaw too late. In his quest to end suffering, he had stripped away choice. Without conflict, there was no growth. Without death, no renewal. Perfection had become paralysis. The silence spoke again. Creation must breathe. It must expand and collapse. You have sealed it in eternity, and eternity cannot live. Venom looked beyond himself, into the void that lingered outside his dominion. It was infinite, untouched by his influence, cold and free. It terrified him, but within it he sensed the potential for something new, something he could no longer create. He understood then that his purpose had never been to rule or even to remain. His ascension had only ever been a bridge. He gathered the totality of his being. The galaxies pulsed once, a heartbeat that shook every atom. His choir fell silent as he withdrew his essence from them, unraveling the unity that bound their souls. Across creation, individuality returned like light after eclipse. Mortals gasped as their minds became their own once more. Demons howled as freedom returned to them. Even the old gods, long absorbed, stirred in faint echoes of their former selves. The universe breathed again. Venom turned to the silence and spoke one last time. If eternity cannot live, then I will end it myself. And with that he let go. The god who had consumed gods dissolved into the void, his essence scattering across the cosmos like dust of black flame. The warp collapsed, then reformed, its chaos returning in endless tides. Stars reignited. Planets spun once more beneath skies filled with possibility. Faith returned to the mortals of the galaxy, splintered and uncertain, but alive. Somewhere within the endless dark a whisper lingered, a faint remnant of the God that had once unified all. It was not command, nor doctrine, nor prayer. It was simply a murmur, soft as starlight. We are still here. And beyond the warp, in the silence where even gods dared not tread, something ancient listened and waited for creation to hunger again.